I think at this point we'll kick it off. It's my pleasure to introduce a good friend, especially of our Maine Irish Heritage Center and our John Ford Project, Professor John Cabelero of Bates College. He's written countless articles on film and beyond, especially issues such as race and ethnicity in cinema, on Bollywood, on classical Hollywood as well as contemporary Hollywood. He's written a wonderful book on Hollywood's Italian-American filmmakers, including Frank Capra and Martin Scorsese and Quentin Tarantino. And he's also really been the chief organizer of a wonderful annual films festival up at Bates College, which is on the move. And they actually, John can tell you more about it, but it's a wonderful film festival. So John's been a real help. He's been here with us for other John Ford events in the past. And I asked John if he would be kind enough to share with you some of his reflections on My Darling Clementine to prepare you for the film. Thank you. John?
Thank you for that, Kevin. It's truly an honor to be asked to introduce this film, especially given who else has been asked. It's a little intimidating to be standing up here knowing that it could have been Joe McBride, or Gerald Perry, or Scott DeFloyd, or Kathy Fuller-Seeley. Instead, you get to me, so I apologize in advance for that. Before doing so, though, I want to thank Gene Haney and the Maine Irish Heritage Center for putting on this wonderful event. When I talk about the Bates Film Festival with my students who organize it, or with anyone who's silly enough to ask me a question about it, and they get a long response. I tell them that their core festivals exist to bring new ideas to mass audiences so that conversations can take place that might not have otherwise. That's exactly what this festival has done over the past few days. It has harnessed a shared love of Ford and movies to bring us together and open up opportunities for us to talk about any number of important issues, from race to gender to representation, to militarism, to violence, to war, to conquest, to conformity, even if we pretend that all we're doing is talking about the movies. This festival has created that space, and it is really a wonderful gift, not just to the Maine, for us, but also to the Maine community. So it really, thank you, Jean and her team that put this on. It is no small effort, and we appreciate it. You got to give me a moment to be a little bit of a fan here of the other people that are at the festival. I want to thank some of the esteemed guests that are here and have been here over the last few days. The value of their work goes beyond their brilliance, and that is sometimes forgotten. The histories that we write as film historians are only as good as the material we get to work with. And that is why I am so grateful for the work that Kathy's doing on Francis Ford. Finding films, putting them together, giving us things that we didn't have before to talk about. Long after her book is written and is winning awards, that is going to be with us, and film scholars are going to be using that to write new histories about the early days of cinema. And I can only hope that after you get done with Francis Ford, you turn your attention to Frank Capra, because there are a number of lost films out there that I've been writing about, having never seen before, and it would be great. Dan Ford, who's not here, wrote Pappy, which was one of the first books I read on Ford and really enjoyed it. But Dan's also the man behind the collection of Ford materials at the Lilly Library at my PhD alma mater of Indiana University, Bloomington. Because of Dan's generosity, one day in Bloomington, I went to the Lilly, was given a pair of linen gloves, and handed a large black box. I put on the gloves, opened the box, and lying there on a bed of silk was John Ford's Best Director Oscar for The Grapes of Wrath. That was a good day. It was a good day. But that's really just the tip of the iceberg in the Lilly's Ford collection. On the same day as my date with Oscar, I spent a couple of hours listening to audio cassettes of the extensive interviews that Dan did with his grandfather in preparation for the book Pappy. I listened as John Ford recounted his boyhood in Maine and the prejudice he faced, and I hope we can talk about that during the panel this afternoon. The Ford collection there at IU is going to be inspiring groundbreaking work on Ford for generations to come. And it's all because of Dan, so thank you to Dan wherever you are. And if you happen to have any other Oscars lying around, or AFI Awards, or PGA Awards, or Golden Lions, or Golden Globes, I'd be happy to take them off your hands. And my students at Bates would thank you. Jerry Perry, his books on Ford and Tarantino in particular have informed my teaching and writing. And his latest film, The Rabbi Goes West, which he co-directed with his partner and my friend and Bates graduate, Amy Gellin, played at the 2022 Bates Film Festival to rave reviews. So if you haven't seen it, you should go check that one out. It's a documentary about an Orthodox rabbi. Is that fair? Hasidic rabbi who goes out to Montana, right? And it's very, very good, and I recommend it highly. Scout Tafoya grew up in the same town where I went to high school, and he worked at the record shop where I spent many hours and many of my dollars as a high school student, and has offered a thought-provoking and provocative analysis of Ford's work that centers the question of race. And we'll be talking about it this afternoon. I'm sure Scott will be talking about it in his introduction, but another one that I highly recommend to you, it's called But God Made Him a Poet, and it's for sale right out there. So thank you for that work. And I'm still a little starstruck that I got to sit on the stage with Joe McBride yesterday. His book, Frank Capra, The Catastrophe of Success, is the best there is. And I read it as a master's student when I was writing my master's thesis on Capra. And immediately it provided a model for the kind of work that I wanted to do, the kind of writing that I wanted to do. And it's a dream I'm still chasing, 20, 30 years later. So to sit on the stage with him was pretty extraordinary. And at the end of it, he turned to me and he just said in one sentence, he said, "You made some good points." And I've been smiling ever since. It's not an exaggeration to say that for me, that sentence is near the top of my list of career achievements. It really was extraordinary. So thank you to Joe, wherever he is. More importantly, thank you guys for coming. It's a beautiful day in Maine. It's 80 degrees, it's sunny, which is unusual this summer. It seems like it's been raining for 3 months. It's beautiful out there. You could be looking at seagulls in the ocean, and instead you're here looking at John Ford movies. And, I thank you for that, because it makes it better for everybody. So thank you for indulging that moment of fanboyness. Let me get to the introduction of the film. I'm sure that Kevin didn't realize this when he asked me to introduce my darling Clementine, but the film holds a special place in my heart. I took my first film class as an undergraduate in 1995. It was a class called Remaking Movies, and as you might suspect, we would watch a movie, and then we would watch its remake, and then we would talk about the differences and try to figure out how and why the film was different. Okay? The first week of screenings was My Darling Clementine and the 1993 film Tombstone, right? And so this film was the first film I watched in my first film class as an undergrad, and it feels a little bit like a full circle moment to be introducing it now at the Portland Museum of Art. So the film was released in 1946, which was an undervalued year in the history of movies. A lot of attention has been devoted to 1939, the year of Gone with the Wind, The Wizard of Oz, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Nanuchka, Only Angels Have Wings, John Ford's Drums Along the Mohawk, John Ford's Young Mr. Lincoln, John Ford's Stagecoach, right? Others, including Mark Harris, in his book, Pictures at a Revolution, have identified 1967 as a watershed year in Hollywood, a year that saw the release of The Graduate, To Serve with Love, Guess Who's Coming to Get Dinner, Wait Until Dark, In the Heat of the Night, Cool Hand Luke, In Cold Blood, and Bonnie and Clyde. Meanwhile, Terrence Raftery calls 1999 the best movie year ever, with the appearance of The Matrix, Fight Club, Boys Don't Cry, Being John Malkovich, Toy Story 2, the Irish-themed Angela's Ashes, and the main set duo of The Iron Giant and The Cider House Rules. But 1946 deserves our attention too. The year saw the release of Howard Hawks' The Big Sleep, Alfred Hitchcock's Notorious, Orson Welles' The Stranger, King Vigor's Duel in the Sun, Charles Vigor's Gilda, William Wyler's The Best Years of Our Lives, and Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life. And then, of course, there was John Ford's My Darling Clementine. What stands out in many cases is that these films in this year mark the return to fiction filmmaking of Hollywood masters who had left behind lucrative careers to enlist in the military during World War II. Weiler, Capra, and Ford had all joined the armed forces and made documentaries in support of the war effort. Weiler most famously for his documentary on the Memphis Belle, Capra for his work on for the U.S. Army Signal Corps' Why We Fight series, including his direction of the Oscar-winning Prelude to War, and Ford for his direction of the Oscar-winning documentaries The Battle of the Midway and December 7th. Those are Oscars 5 and 6 for him. If you wonder why some people say 6 and some people say 4, it's because he got 4 Best Director Oscars, but then he also got 2 Best Documentary Oscars during the war. As Harris outlines in his book, Five Came Back, Weiler, Capra, and Ford, along with John Huston and George Stevens Jr., who had also enlisted, each returned changed men, offering pictures of a world that could easily be overcome by darkness, both visually and thematically. Weiler's The Best Years of Our Lives focuses on the difficulties that returning vets faced when they tried to reintegrate into U.S. society. Capra's It's a Wonderful Life features a nightmarish sequence where the director suggested that only one man, Jimmy Stewart's George Bailey, prevented Bedford Falls from becoming Pottersville. And Ford's My Darling Clementine is similarly themed with dark visuals. Ford scholar Tad Gallagher has called Clementine Ford's blackest movie. The dark silhouettes, the rainy nighttime scenes, the shadowy saloon scenes all help to confirm Gallagher's assessment. Thematically, the film also offers its dark moments. Henry Fonda's Wyatt Earp repeatedly asks, "What kind of town is this?" Victor Matour's Doc Holliday descends into alcoholism and contemplates suicide, like George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life. The Clantons are without redemptive qualities. As Gallagher says, everyone's lost, everyone's alone. One of the hallmarks of the post-war film noir was its investment in fate, a sense that no matter what a person did, they were powerless to escape their destiny. And that, too, is a part of My Darling Clementine. Ford was a master of visual design, and he used that skill to visually convey the sense of individual powerlessness and inevitability. In the scene where the Clantons come to speak to Wyatt Earp at the saloon, Ford used production design and camera framing to create a striking composition that communicates the theme without a word of dialogue. I'll show you this clip here. This is from Gallagher's video essay on the Criterion Collection DVD, My Darling Clementine. And it's going to run without sound here because I want to emphasize the visuals. As Gallagher has shown, the bar and the lights hanging above it lead in straight lines to Wyatt. Doom is his destiny, remarks Gallagher, and when the Clantons sidle up to the bar, in Gallagher's words, they are threats lined up like feathers on an arrow. You can't really see it there, but you will when you watch the film later today. And yet, while the film explores dark themes and offers a gloomy view of life, it is also one of Ford's most optimistic. Ford had just returned from years of filming, watching, and experiencing war. In his post-war film, he offered a vision of the West that may well have been among his most totalizing framings of good and evil. The Earps are good. The Clantons, which McBride has suggested are representative of the Axis powers, are bad. The approach grafts nicely onto a dynamic that film theorist Peter Wolin sees as the defining conflict in Ford's films, the tension between what he terms the wilderness and the garden. Ford films like The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, one of my favorites, are suspicious of the value of the gardening civilization and mournful of the loss of wilderness. But Clementine seems civilization as, and again this is Joe, a quote, very good thing. Ford communicates this argument through the film's narrative structure. Generically, My Darling Clementine is almost 2 separate movies. There's the action revenge narrative between the Earps and the Clantons. You can barely even see it, that's how dark that part of the film is. And there's the romance between Wyatt and Clementine. Throughout the film, Ford deliberately separates the two, shooting many of the revenge scenes in a film noir style, while the scenes of the romantic courtship are framed in bright, high-key lighting. Indeed, it's unclear how much Clementine Carter knows about the conflict with the Clantons. By isolating the 2 plots from each other, Ford paints a picture of 2 different worlds. One, the wilderness, characterized by darkness, violence, revenge, and one, the garden, civilization, characterized by sunlight, love, dancing, and music. Which would you prefer? And Clementine, Ford is not shy about offering a clear answer to that question. But Ford was never much of a plot guy. According to McBride, and this is a quote, Ford said once that he liked it when narrative disappeared and the director could express himself in other ways. He was never terribly interested in plot. He was interested in atmosphere and mood. These grace notes allow the plot to fade into the background, revealing the dynamics of the world and the people that populate it. And one of the film's best sequences, the victory over civilization over wilderness, is communicated through the town's architecture. In the scene, Wyatt has just had his hair cut and been perfumed by the town barber. Soon he and Clementine will walk through the town to a church that is just being built. As the couple stroll along the covered boardwalk, Ford tracks back, and this is him here shooting this very scene. And we see that the posts that shelter the couple change. Positioned between the camera and the characters, they go from rough, raw pieces of lumber to smooth, lathe, sanded pillars that offer shelter and a greater sense of refinement. I'll show you this clip now. You can see the pillars here on the left, and when they turn, it'll be between the camera and the character. Okay, that goes from there, then they go to the church. Once again, the garden bests the wilderness. The scene that follows hammers the point home. The dance scene, McBride says, if I had to pick one scene in the movies that's pure magic, it would be that. Wyatt goes from an outsider to an integrated member of the community with just a few dance steps, ones that echo Fonda's dance as Abraham Lincoln and the young Mr. Lincoln. Despite Clementine's status as a Ford masterwork, the director himself was dubious about the film. Ford completed a cut of the film and submitted it to 20th Century Fox and its producer, Darrell F. Zanuck. Zanuck and Ford had worked together previously on films like The Grapes of Wrath and How Green Was My Valley. Those two films had won back-to-back Best Director Oscars for Ford in 1940 and 1941. I've actually held the Grapes of Wrath Oscar, you may have heard. On those pictures, Zanuck had recut the films with Ford's consent, and the director was pleased with the results. After screening Ford's cut of Clementine, Zanuck once again asked Ford if he could recut the picture, and Ford agreed. Zanuck removed 30 minutes from Ford's cut, added new scenes that were shot by another director named Lloyd Bacon, and then altered the ending. You guys know about John Ford. You can imagine how he responded to this. Ford was less than thrilled, to say the least, with the results, but today the film rests in the upper echelon of Ford's oeuvre. Like most films about Wyatt Earp, My Darling Clementine is mythical. In real life, Earp was rarely a lawman, and never for very long. He was a professional gambler who knew Doc Holliday long before the two arrived in Tombstone. The gunfight at the OK Corral didn't take place on Main Street in Tombstone. It took place somewhere outside of it. And later in his life, Earp found his way to Hollywood, where he reinvented himself, embellishing his past, putting the legend instead of the facts, and morphing into the mythical creation that he has become. And yet historical inaccuracies matter little when it comes to art. In My Darling Clementine, Ford uses the legend of Wyatt Earp to tell a tale that gets at the tension between the wilderness and civilization, communicates the view of World War II, and underscores the values that he believes define U.S. identity, or at least what he thought those values were at the time he made this film, because as we talked about yesterday, he was always changing his opinion. So, I hope you enjoy this film. I think it's somewhat underrated. It's deceptively simple, I think. And I think it'll look great on the big screen up here. So thank you.